JavaScript module is. We're basically going to convert this jQuery, what I call spaghetti code, into a module that makes more sense, that you can look at and kind of really quickly see what's going on. And it's going to work together a lot better with any future code we have. It's not like this is the end of the world, but imagine if you had 50 times this and it's just jQuery function after jQuery function all just splattered onto a page. That's just a pain. Or honestly, even if it's just this file, looking at it, you can't immediately tell what's going on. You have to actually read through to see what's happening, and there's much better ways of organizing that code. So let me show you what kind of module I got here. This is that people adder. Let me show you the HTML for this. Let me add a couple people. So I have a div with ID of people. This is kind of my wrapping div for the whole thing. I have an H1 inside of it, probably not necessary. I have an input, I have a button, and then I have a UL. The UL is basically just has a bunch of LIs in it for each person. And so then here's an LI for each person. It has a span and a delete button in it. That's it. I'll show you my actual HTML and the code. Here's my input, button, UL. Now, instead of a bunch of LIs, the LIs have to be dynamic. They have to be created. So I created a script tag with a type of text template. And when your browser sees this, it does nothing. It's not JavaScript. It doesn't do anything with that. So then I can code any HTML in there that I want, and then I can get that out, and it's basically a JavaScript string, which is what I'm doing here. Var template equals, let's go find that element and get the HTML. I could do this instead. I could do all that mustache stuff here, that weird stuff that you're seeing. That's Mustache.js. So if you're not familiar with mustache or templating, well, you'll get an intro to that here. So for each person in my people object, or for each item in my people array, I'm going to create an LI, and I'm just going to add the value of that in there. So that's basically what's going on there. And that's mustache. So I could code it like this, but you're pretty limited. You don't want to add much more than one element. Otherwise, it gets a big, messy string. And you don't see the pretty syntax highlighting. And then I'm putting HTML in my JavaScript. That's just not a very good practice. You want to kind of avoid that as much as you can. So here my HTML is still in my HTML. I just have to get the template out. That's a good way of going. So I just had to at least mention that for people who were not familiar with what mustache was. So let's go ahead and convert this spaghetti code into a module. So starting off, let's just create, we'll just call it people equals, and we're just going to create our object. And then our people array can live on the object. So I could go people is an empty array. And then my template can live here as well. The template can live, let's just snatch it out for now. There we go. So now I've automatically just kind of incorporated my people and my template into my object. And what's cool about that is I no longer have these two global variables. Yippee, I can get rid of you. Now, a simple way of getting rid of global variables would be to wrap this in a self-executing anonymous function. There we go. So I just created a function, and now I can have it execute itself. So if I were to actually put this down here, if I were to wrap this code in a self-executing anonymous function, that's kind of one way to get around it. Let me move this down here. Now var people is scoped to this function, so it's not global anymore. This isn't global anymore. If I do var template outside of that function, blah, 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 then this is not overriding this. So that's kind of one quick and dirty way that you can at least get rid of global variables. It's kind of a module, but it's a spaghetti code module still. So we've got that. So that gets rid of global variables, but it doesn't really give us better coding practices. And once again, most times you're going to have more code than this. So these are just my two functions that I'm using to illustrate modular JavaScript. So then I'm going to go ahead and have an init function. Init stands for initialize or initialization. And init's kind of going to be how we kick off our module. So what we're going to do is, let me comment out all this code, is we're going to define our people module, and then we're going to run people.init. And you know what I'm also going to do? I'm also going to keep this people module wrapped in this anonymous function, just so there's still no global variables. We don't really need a global variable for people. And so now this var people is not global either. Yippee. So we've got people, our object defined, and then we're going to run people init. And so that's going to run this function. That kind of gets everything kicked off. So let's kind of start addressing some of the issues in our ground rules. Let's take on this one, efficient DOM usage. I do not like that there is DOM getting searched here, DOM getting searched here, DOM getting searched here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to cache DOM at the very beginning. So let's make a cache DOM method. We're actually going to find some things. We'll go this.el equals people module. And so basically we're just finding people module and then we're saving it. Now it's on our object. And whenever I store a jQuery wrapped object, then I always like to add a dollar to it. Instead of just calling it this EL, I like to call it this $EL. So I know that that's a jQuery search and I can do all the jQuery things on it, like show, hide, toggle, slide, all that stuff. So let's see, what else do we have to do? We have to find that button. So I can do this button equals this.el. See, now I can reference this EL. I don't have to search the DOM again. I've already saved it somewhere. Find button. Let's see, what else are we doing in here? We're finding an input. So let's go ahead and find an input. Let's use some multiple cursors to do that slick and fast. There we go. We're finding the input. We're finding the UL. Let's do that. There we go. And I think that's it. That should do it for now. So now we've saved a lot of DOM. We only have one of these going on in our whole module. That's a good sign. I only want to see one of these green dollar signs. So that's a really, really good thing. I've got a second one for my template. So I guess since my template is inside of my people module, I could actually forget template here and I could actually cache the template if I wanted to. Let's get rid of that and let's do this template equals, that's not a dollar because this is just going to be an HTML string, .el find, and then we're going to find that within it and get the HTML. Did that do it right? Yeah, that should have done it. Okay, so this template is now set as well. So the only thing I actually have going on up here is people. So then let's actually create a render method. Render is the function and the method. It's a very common name for let's take the current state of my module and let's commit it, or let's translate that into my HTML DOM. So let's take that JavaScript module, let's print it to this UL is basically what's going on. So this is going to be the point in time where we take every person in our people array and we're going to create an LI out of that. It's basically what's going on here on this click method. So let's go ahead and what does this render method do? I'm going to uncomment this. It basically just takes all the people and it creates a data object and then it does an HTML.html on our UL. So let's go ahead and do that mustache render here. So we're going to go data equals, this is going to be this.people. So I'm making a data object. If you're not familiar with mustache, here's what mustache does. You just go mustache render and you give it a template. So the template might be name, or maybe it'll say hi name. And then you give it an object. So that object could be name will. And it's basically just going to take, oh, it's looking for name. Let's find name in the object. Okay, there's name. So then it's just going to create a string that says hi will. That's basically what mustache does. It takes values and spits them into a string. So in this case, we're just going to take our array of people is all we need. And for each person, we're going to spit that value. Dot is basically a representation of the whole value of what's in the array. So for each person, we're going to spit out an entire LI. So that's what's going to go on. And we can just go this.ul. We've cached that up here, so we don't need to search the DOM for that. This UL HTML, we're going to render this.template since we've already stored this.template, and we're going to put the data in there. So that should work. So let's go ahead and maybe add a startup person, maybe Will and Laura. And let's say on init, we're going to cache the DOM and then we're going to render. So we'll kind of render right away. Let's see if that worked. Yep, we got two people, Will and Laura. Button does absolutely nothing because we haven't programmed that in. So I could also say Will and Steve. And there we go. We have Will and we have Steve. Excellent. So our app is kind of working so far. Already it's a lot cleaner. One thing that's great about modular JavaScript is you can look at it, and each method has a name, so you can see what's going on based off the name. I know this is initializing the module. I clearly know this is caching the DOM, and I clearly know this is rendering. So ideally, this is going to be the only thing that ever touches the DOM itself. Everything else talks to this module, maybe changes this people array, but nothing else actually interacts with the HTML except for my render method. This is very clean so far, so I'm liking it. So now let's make this render on click. On click, we want to take the value of our input, push it onto this people array, and render again. So to do that, we need to bind some events. So let's bind events. And if you're new to modular JavaScript, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, this is way too much thinking. I'm not used to thinking this much when I code. Yeah, well, if you're not thinking when you code, then that's kind of probably the next step. You've learned how to code. Now let's learn how to think about how we should code. And it probably looks very foreign to you because this is new, but if you write one or two modules, then everyone's going to have a cache DOM, a bind events, a render. So this is not exactly crazy. This is actually preparing you to learn Backbone JS, which is very, very similar to what I'm doing today. So let's do a bind events function. I just want to give you that warning, I guess, in case you thought I'm crazy and I'm going to make your life miserable and very complicated. So as you guessed, the bind events method is for one thing and one thing only, binding events. So let's go ahead and see, what do? We're going to, on the button's click event, then we are going to add a person. So let's go ahead and make this dot input, button on click, and we'll make an add person function. That seems like the right name for it. So add person. There we are, because I don't want to actually make a function in here, because now this method has several things. It's binding an event listener and it's adding a person. I don't like that. Add person. This is only responsible for binding events. So whenever the click goes, we're going to add the person over here. This is also a very good pattern. You usually don't want to write functions directly into an event binding. It's just not a good pattern for a lot of reasons. And I think that's all that has to happen for now. Yep, so add person. Let's go ahead and go, we need to get the value. We're going to push that right there. I'll just copy this in. So this dot people, we're going to push the input value. This dot input dot val. Now there's going to be a problem right here, which I'll show you in a minute. This will not work correctly. This will actually have some problems. So let's go ahead and save this and test it out, and we'll see what my problems are. Let's go to my console. Looking good. Let's add a test. Error. This is not, it's giving me all these weird things. Something is not a function. Okay, let's go ahead and find out what's going on here. Here's one thing that you got to know with events. Whenever you're binding an event, the context is going to change. So this value of add person is no longer going to be people. So if you know, everywhere I'm saying this really refers to people. This is people.cacheDOM, people.bindEvents, people.render. Well, when an event fires, it sets this value to be the item that the event was bound on. So this will equal this dot button. So this will be the value of button inside of add person. I can get around that by simply binding it to this. And if it's confusing, basically just realize when you're doing modular JS, if you want a method to always run in the context where this value points to its module, then you have to bind it. Because as soon as it gets called from an event listener, from a click event, the context of this will change. The value of this will change. In our case, we don't want the value of this to ever change. We want this to always mean the people module. So in that case, I'm binding it to this. This. I know that's a lot of saying. So now it's going to work. Add person.bind is, this dot add person. There we go. Test. And, okay, so it's adding. It's kind of working. We are now adding a person to the array, and then we want to render. Let's re-render again. So add it to the array, re-render. Let's go ahead and check it, make sure it works, test, and we got a new person, test 2. Awesome, excellent. And you know what else I want to do is I also want to clear the value. this.input.val equals nothing. So once that renders, I want to clear the value of my name. Excellent. So that was very easy to do. Test2. So now my name value clears out every time. So next up, we just got to delete our stuff. So you see, we're getting a little bit more code. We're definitely getting a few more functions going on, but it's extremely clear. If I know that there's a problem whenever my person gets added, or let's just take this back out. I'm not going to clear this value. Let's say we've had our to-do list working for a year and I have to come into it a year later. I've forgotten most all the code. But my manager says, well, now I hate how test stays in here. This should always clear when I add a person. It should be empty. So then you just open this code and you say, okay, on add person. Oh, there we go, add person. Well, that's really easy to do. You can add in your line of code to add person, and you know everything else is separated out and nothing's going to break. So that's the biggest reason that modular code is a big win, is because it separates out your code. I don't have to worry about the module initializing. I don't have to worry about the module caching the DOM or binding events. All that's happening. I just want to add one feature to when the person gets added. So I only have to worry about this piece of code. I don't even have to worry about it rendering or any of that stuff. So modular code, big, big, big win. So let's go ahead and get this delete event going on right here, and then we're done. So my delete event is a delegate event on the UL. If you don't know about delegation, I'm going to add a little bit to my jQuery series in there so you can see what delegation really is. So this UL is going to delegate to the iDelete click. So let's go. We already have a bind events method going on. Let's just add one more event. This.ul delegate iDelete click. Let's go ahead and call this delete person. So when I class delete gets clicked, we're going to go up to that LI. We're going to find out which number we are. Are we number 3? We're going to delete number 3 from our people list, and then we're going to re-render. It's pretty simple. So once again, let's go ahead and go this.delete person, and let's bind this. Same thing. We got to make sure we bind that. So that was easy. We were able to just add one more event, and now this method is going to fire when we click on delete person. Let me see if that works. Make sure that's going delete. Yay, always fires. Oh, and look, that also tells me people splice is not a function. Oh, that's because I was wondering how that was working all of a sudden. That's because I uncommented my code. So let me go ahead and comment that code back. Almost done here. Last method. So this is correct. I want to keep this. Var remove. This is the one that I want to remove. So I'm going up to my closest LI. So when I click on here, I'm going to go up and find my closest LI. Okay, that's this. I want to remove that. Except for I don't actually want to do it like this. No. No more HTML touching in the other methods. This is the guy that touches HTML. This guy does not touch HTML. So you go away. I'm just going to call you remove. Since you're still a jQuery selection, so I'll keep you as the dollar signal. And then I want to, let's see, I want to, in UL, this.ul, I want to find the LIs, and I want to get the index of my current LI. So this is going to find out, hey, what number am I? The guy that got clicked. Am I number 3? Am I number 2? So let's find that I. That's the guy I want to remove. And then this.people, let's splice it straight out. And then let's render again. So basically, everybody's just calling render. When we boot up, we're going to render. When we add a person, we're going to render. When we delete a person, we're going to render. So here we go. Let's see if it works. Will goes away. E is not defined. That's because I didn't add E in there. That's my event. So if I want to call it that, that's a little clearer for people who are not sure exactly what's going on. Let's reload it. There we go. There we go. All gone. And my module is working. So this is a module. This is kind of how you do modular JavaScript. And in the next video, whenever that comes out, I'll show you kind of how to do a revealing module pattern. So we only have maybe a few things. I don't really want to expose cache DOM, bind events. I don't really want to expose all these to an API. But it would be cool to do add person, delete person. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. Let me make this global again, this.var people. So now I kind of have this API here. I can go people.addPerson. So maybe another part of the program up here wants to add a person to my list. Well, I can add a new person. There we go. I added a person to the list, except for that didn't really work because I actually have to send it a value. Let's go and do something like this. Let's go value or. So if a value is passed in, we'll actually do that. If not, we'll look it up from the input. That's pretty easy. So now I have this API going. It's called people. Add person. There we go. We added Laura. And now Laura can still go away. So that's kind of cool. I can add a bunch of people. So now a module up here could actually talk to my other module. But I don't want them to be able to call cache DOM. I don't want them to be able to call bind events. I really just want them to be able to call, I don't want them to call render either. I really just want them to be able to call these two events. So in the next video, we'll get into a revealing module pattern where we only allow people to have access to these two and all the rest is internal. Because once again, people can hack this as well. They could go people.people, which is the array, and they could push something on there themselves. Oh no, that's a bad pattern. God. But it didn't render. Oh crud. So now what happens? So now I delete Laura and all of a sudden God shows up. So that's not a good pattern for people.